everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of the GoT Rewatch podcast presented by the Terrible Video Gamers Club. I'm your host of the evening, Tyler Schatz, the not late lord of the land. With me this fine evening is one Gary Delaney.
Gary, also probably smothered by a pillow to death, Delaney.
And also Mr. Nick Castillo.
Howdy, everyone.
All right. So for this episode, we're reviewing just another kind of singular episode of the show Game of Thrones, episode 10 from season 1, titled Fire and Blood. So the episode basically just kind of picks up with right after the conclusion of episode 9, where Ned Stark was beheaded. It's just kind of that scene after there where Arya is kind of just seeing the aftermath of everything happen. Like, she sees Sansa Fate, she sees the body being dragged away, and then she kind of gets drug into an alley by that guy from the Night's Watch. Can anyone remember his name offhand? I never do.
No.
Watch work for me for now. Just that guy.
That guy in the Night's Watch. We'll just call him that guy.
That guy.
He kind of, excuse me, talks about how he basically sits there and cuts her hair down to be more of like a boy, because she can kind of somewhat pass off for a young boy. This guy keeps calling her little boy, or boy, you gotta listen to me, boy, and talks about how they're going to basically go north to be kind of, Arya is going to travel with this guy to go north, basically to get out of King's Landing and maybe even make it back to Winterfell, or if for nothing else, head back to the wall where Jon is at. Gary has a question.
Did you, on a rewatch, feel that it was like, not knowing where it was going to end, imagine you're watching it the first time, how freaking scary that scene was? Because, like, just, I think maybe if you didn't pay attention on the first watch through to have a good understanding of who that guy was, like, he just drags Arya off and, like, it's just, like, shouting at her in, like a fucking psychopath about how, like, you shut up, boy, and, like, starts cutting her hair, and you're like, holy fuck, this is really serious, and, like, just a weird tone between, like, yeah.
You go ahead.
I was going to say, it's kind of just, there's probably maybe a little bit of both, like, fear and just utter shock. I think Arya is still kind of going through, as, like, she was basically there. She knows she didn't see it happen, but she knows her father was beheaded, basically, because that guy also hugged her basically across and say, don't you dare look at this. So I think it's kind of just a little bit of just utter shock of knowing her father is dead, and also kind of somewhat fear, like you had mentioned there, because this guy is basically just yelling at her to, you know, pay attention to him, listen up to what he has to say.
Yeah,
I kind of thought the same thing. It was I can remember. No big spoilers that this guy doesn't have a huge part to play in the next couple episodes, but I can remember going back, I didn't really remember him that much, but seeing this episode again, watching it with the context, yeah, I kind of felt that way, Gary. Like, I remember in that moment watching it for the first time that it was kind of like, who's this guy who's just grabbing her, and is he trying to help her, or is he trying to turn her into Joffrey and the Lannisters? You know, it seemed very out of place that he just started screaming at her and then calling her a boy. But now, with a little bit of nuance, seeing the episode again this time, yeah, he's definitely trying to save her. And I think he even starts calling her Ari, because he says, like, what's your name? Ari.
Yeah, I will definitely echo that too. Like, if I remember, so it's been years since I first watched this, these episodes here and stuff, and I will remember it was kind of confusing too, but that's also too, I was still just struggling with trying to figure out who the heck everybody was at that time. All right, so to kind of just move on there from that, we then...
Oh, wait, one second.
Yep.
Before they do head north, too, I did have a note. Before they head north, he turns around and screams at everybody that they're going to go and head north. He says it's 1,000 leagues to the wall, because he's down there gathering people from the jail cells and prisons. He does say winter's coming, and that's number 7.
So that's actually a little bit later on in the scene, in the episode. But yeah, we can, I guess...
Completely out of order.
Jumping around. Sorry.
Nick, completely out of order, Castillo. Okay. Yeah, I guess to just kind of touch on that a little bit there, we can just kind of skip up to that scene there and just kind of cover it, because I don't think really much happens with Arya after that scene.
No.
It's basically...
go
ahead.
Sorry. In that scene, I think along with that, there was also her first interactions with some other uh, kids, felons in that wagon. And then also, I made note, if we're going to just pass the scene later, introduces the three people in the back of the wagon, and one of those people becomes important. But I just thought that was interesting on a rewatch.
He's a hooded character in that scene because I don't think they fully casted him.
Right.
But then so that's where Arya gets her little boy orphan name Ari. And then there's the kind of fear tactics that bigger kid is trying to use on Arya to try and get the sword from her. He's not named in this episode. His name will come up later on. We'll kind of talk about it then there. But he talks about how he kicked a kid to death, like kicking him in the balls and killed him or something like that, trying to put fear into Arya.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see also too that Gendry, we found out the bastard son of Robert there is also with the group heading north to the wall because I want to say his master, his Smith master, kind of sold him to the Night's Watch maybe or something like that. It's like
He said he got sick of him.
Yeah, I don't think it was Gendry's choice completely to go up to the wall, but details are fading me right now with that, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And then 1,000 leagues from here to the wall, and winter is coming.
All right, I won't jump around anymore. Sorry.
So he says. Next, we go back to Winterfell, and Bran has yet another vision with the three-eyed raven, and it's kind of trying to take him down to the crypts where according to him, where his father is. So it's like a dream sequence, but then they also kind of at the end of it cut into Bran talking to, her name is Asha.
Yes.
The wildling gal that was captured by Robb and Theon, who Bran is starting to become closer friendly with. They're having this conversation, and he's telling her what happened, and she's just trying to convince him that no, that's not really it's just a dream. It's just a dream. It's nothing serious. You'll see your father again someday, because it's kind of implied there that he's having these visions of his father down in the crypts because that's where the Starks go to be buried. And it's kind of nice. We get just a little bit of a history lesson of the Starks there. You learn about Ned's father. I'm going to draw a blank on it. Is it Richard? No.
Rickard.
Rickard Stark, Ned's father. Then
He was burned alive.
Yep. Burned alive by the Mad King there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see Lyanna's statue again. And then when they're down there, they happen to get startled or stumbled upon by a Shaggy Dog, which is Rickon's, which is Bran's younger brother there, Rickon. Shaggy Dog is also down there with him, and they're both down there because Rickon's had that same dream that Bran had.
A quick note on that. Trying not to give too much away for those of us who have seen everything thus far. Bran has had a couple of these visions. Do we think that this is just a weird one-off occurrence, or do you think that Rickon has been having visions of three-eyed ravens or similar things?
I'm trying to remember my history with reading the books there too. I think some of this stuff is touched on more in the books about Rickon possibly having some of these same visions and stuff that Bran is. I don't know how often it gets brought up though in the books. Do you remember, Gary, there? You look like you're...
I don't. I just assumed it was like I don't know, like a old god sort of mischief thing where those two are both in Winterfell, which has a weirwood tree, so maybe they're just closer connected to the mystic weirwood god powers.
Okay.
I'm just bullshitting now.
Just curious. Interesting scene. I didn't remember that from last time, that Rickon also said something about he was having visions.
So then, as they're leaving the crypts, they happen to run into Maester Luwin, and he has the sad, somber look on his face and ends up breaking reading my notes here, I can't now actually remember if it happened in that scene, if it kind of happens cut after that scene ends. They're Luwin breaking the news to Bran that his father has been killed.
It was cut after that scene.
Okay.
Asha was saying something along the lines, if I remember right, about just because you're having visions that your dad is in a crypt doesn't mean that he's... And she's kind of like, they see Master Luwin, who locks eyes with them, and he has that look like, oh crap, what bad news does he have? And it seems like, oh, maybe, and just like the realization sets in, and I think we see the scene cut from above and from a distance, like we're looking down in the courtyard as Master Lewin walks over to Bran and explains what's happened.
I think that scene jumps directly to Catelyn Stark. I don't know where she's at. Anyway, wherever they're at, I think they're at the Twins.
A little south of the Twins, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does direct cut to Catelyn kind of walking through the camp there. She's kind of got that stoic look on her face, and you see all the men kind of turning and bowing towards her because obviously they have heard the news there of what happened to Lord Eddard Stark there. And I'm going to make another comment here, and I was going to have his name looked up again because I looked up the composer's name again after our last podcast to get the pronunciation right. Still got it. Still don't remember it. I'll have to maybe mute myself and quickly look it up again. But like the music here is just so good again of just like building that somber tone there of everyone just kind of like taking in the news that their lord, warden has just been killed. They've kind of lost one of the things that they were fighting for.
Yeah, really, yeah, that was the whole point, was they were going to go down and liberate him. So it's kind of like, oh, well, there goes that. And it's definitely, I think, changed from a sense of liberation to vengeance now.
I also made a note in my notes about how that scene cuts to Catelyn Stark, and she's walking past the men, and all the men are kind of curtsying or bowing. And then, but it was like as soon as she gets out, like kind of alone, she just see her just crumble, and is like starts crying into a tree. That like she's trying to stay lordly and strong because she understands that these men are going to war for her family and she's trying to be stoic and lordly, and then she's alone. She's like, shit. So I thought that was interesting.
Yes, agreed.
Very much.
She was definitely keeping her composure for the troops around her. So, okay, so I got it here. It's Ramin Djawadi. Ramin Djawadi.
Ramin Djawadi.
Yep.
Okay.
So again, like, hats off to him. This music is so good in this show.
Very good.
Catelyn then basically ends up to find where Robb is at, and he is out there basically beating a tree with his sword. And she says, "What are you doing, Robb? You've ruined your sword."
Mm-hmm.
And Robb just tears in his eye, basically says, "I'll kill them all." And Catelyn kind of comes up to him, kind of reminds him, "No, first we need to get your sisters back, and then we'll kill them all."
Like in a hug. I definitely noticed that. Maybe ask if you guys noticed this, like that the makeup or like in this episode was a little different or a little more fancy because they had a lot of kind of very tight facial reaction shots. I noticed it when the wildling lady gives her kind of reaction, like she just made up a little more fancy, and the same with Catelyn, like is very like they were trying a little harder in this episode on the facial makeup because there was a lot of facial reactions, a lot of emotion that was kind of being carried by trying to hold scenes up by facial reactions.
Sure.
And yeah, probably just to kind of like the direction and stuff kind of just starting to find its way here as the show is starting to progress more and more. So next we get to go over to our favorite king in King's Landing, Mr. Joffrey there, is holding his first court session there basically, and he's got a jester sitting there playing some music. And I kind of laughed.
Bard. I think the word you're looking for is bard.
There, thank you.
Not jester.
He is correct.
And then I wrote down just kind of a lyric from his song there. The lion ripped balls off and boarded the rest. It's kind of insinuating that he's talking about the Lannisters kind of neutering Robert Baratheon. But
I think not just the Lannisters, like Cersei directly.
Yes.
About castrating her husband or taking the fight out of him, perhaps. Yeah. That was an interesting telling scene.
But then Joffrey asks the bard their fingers or tongue there basically, and just kind of right away from like even just seeing other movies and stuff like that, when something like this is asked, you know what's going to happen here.
Oh man.
And the bard says he'd rather keep his fingers for working and stuff like that, so then they eventually work to take out his tongue so he could no longer sing this song to anyone else.
Also, that whole scene goes on where like that crazy shit is happening in the background. Like you can hear him screaming and like everyone else just carrying on like it was some birds chirping in the background.
I was mentioning just before this podcast started that like some of these characters having the foresight of seeing some of this stuff, there's things you see later on when you think of these characters, like, okay, what was Joffrey's character? Like, okay, what was Cersei's character and Sansa's character? And like at this early stage in the series, this is only episode 10 in the first season, there's some of these people who are just sort of like sliding into these habits that you see. I mean, characters have development and they change a little bit over time. But I was mentioning to Gary, it's interesting to see some of these things that just are sort of like you take you aback as like, okay, so Joffrey might have had some of these evil tendencies way back in season 1 as well. I mean, he certainly had these little interactions like with the butcher's boy and with Sansa, and certainly to his mom, he was very candid about, you know, we should kill all the Starks, like we talked about. But like right away, like there's no, I mean, especially since Ned, who just got his head lopped off, he's apparently caught this boy. The reason this bard is here is because he was singing this song to local commoners in a tavern or something like that. He's like, I bet the people in the tavern liked your song. And that's where he caught this guy from. So rather than just sort of laugh it off as, oh, someone said something bad about me, the first thing he does is capture someone and take his tongue out. And the nonchalance that just happens where he like takes his crown off. He's like, yep, take his tongue out. I'm good. Sets his crown down and then walks off, as Gary said, and just starts another conversation. It's like, oh, yeah, the person behind me, I'm not even going to watch the punishment be doled out. I'm just going to move on with my life because I've got better things to do. It just sort of speaks to the character of who this new king is looking like he's going to turn out to be.
I don't know. I think it's an interesting, going back to what you know at this point, which is that very likely Joffrey is not Robert's actual son. I don't know if he knows that for sure.
No, he does not. He has no clue. At this
point, he's still defensive of his father, who, he just watched his father die. So as I watch it, I see it as very much like a grieving son, and then a grieving son, like having someone like take the personal drama of his life and like make fun of it and just being like, fuck you, bro. Like, that's not cool. And unfortunately, he's the king. So the fuck you, bro, that's not cool is, I'm just going to take out your tongue, dude. Whatever. He even says in that scene, like, I could just slit your throat. Like, yeah, whatever. But, all I got to do is teach you a lesson and teach people a lesson of like, dude, you got to respect me. You got to respect my family.
I agree with you in the sense that everybody grieves differently, and he could very well be acting this violence out of his grief
differently.
However, in the talk with the butcher's boy, Robert Baratheon was still very much alive. So I don't think it's so much as the grieving son. It's just the evil tendencies of I want to hurt somebody. I want to see somebody be hurt. That narcissistic sadisticness.
We can move on from this.
This person made fun of me. I want to hurt them now because I can.
Because I can. And that's the thing, too. It's kind of the pecking order is when he finds out, and he's kind of there already, that as king, he can get away with whatever he wants. It's kind of no holds barred to the depths of his depravity as far as what he wants to be able to do. I think before he even sat down, I mean, this happened before this scene happened, but off screen, I imagine he said, all right, let's hear the song that you sang at the tavern, because we just kind of jump into this guy hearing this song. I think that he probably already said, I'm going to end up doing something mean to this person before it even happened. Like he had that mentality of it's going to end with me taking your fingers, your tongue, or killing you.
To make an example. Anyway, we can just move forward. Obviously, Nick I'm trying to play the yin to your yang because you are very, very like on one side, and I feel like somebody's gotta try to weave some light into your darkness.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you trying to paint Joffrey Baratheon as the saint in all of this.
Yeah, you're being outvoted in this, Gary, even with the lens of already knowing what happens and stuff too. I still think everything up to this point, he is still just an evil character.
Yeah.
Next scene where he like forces
Is that next? We can launch into that.
Yeah, so
Sansa to look at the spiked heads
because he's grieving, quote unquote.
And obviously, I think it's that is maybe a little bit of like he like in the last scene, I feel like he was trying to like grieve and not have people talk shit, not see weakness in him because he's a new king.
Not weakness, I agree with.
Any new king can't show weakness. In this next scene, he's more just like I had people trying to rise up against me, and here are their heads. And if your brother tries to rise up against me, I'll have his head too. Like he's just making his stand. Like, because he understands that easily, like within his lifetime, or slightly before he was born, like there was a rebellion that changed the hands and who hold the throne. So he's very much trying to grasp. He's the first successor to the throne since the throne changed families. So he's trying to Kim Jong-un it.
That's just an absolute terrible reference there.
I have to jump in, and then I'm going to toss it to Tyler for his comments on the scene too. But I will flip the perspective a little bit. Not just person in power, person who has authority but has not earned authority. I'll put it that way, compared to someone who has no position of power but has the willpower to trump that person. Sansa's character is been timid. She's been absolutely everything about pleasing other people, what she hopes to get, like her Cloud9 type perspective. And in this scene where not only has her worst thing just happened of her family being decimated, but then being forced to watch that ruin in the sense of watching her father's head on a pike, she has this moment spark that is so small, but I think it really speaks to the strength that her character may show when he says, maybe I'll give you your brother's heads as well. And she says, or maybe they'll give me yours, which is completely against her character. Like everything that we've seen Sansa thus far, that is not a line that she should have. That's an Arya Stark line, right? The fact that she said it shows that there is some, there's more Stark in her than we may have originally thought. This resilience, this fight against what the Southerners say and do. And that line, I think, is really powerful. The fact that she says it, the fact alone that she says it, but the fact also she says it to currently the most powerful person who she knows has spite against her. I mean, she just, in the 2 episodes prior, the end of episode 8, was on her knees saying, we would never do anything against you. My family and my life are yours, yada, yada. My family, my father, yada, yada. And then in this next episode, she said, maybe they'll cut your head off. That is a complete 180 change. And I think it really shows that Sansa has more fight in her than maybe we originally thought. What do you think, Tyler?
I did kind of call out that line there. I wrote down that line. First, before I get into kind of talking about my view on that scene, I just want to call out our boy Sandor Clegane in the gold cloak gear there. Looking way out of place there in that like golden gear, whereas you normally just see him in like a black armor set. So that was just kind of strange to see him like that.
Interesting to see the difference between Sir Meryn, who was one of the gold cloaks, who, obeying Joffrey, slapped her twice, and then the next big gold cloak person you see come over and help without being asked is Sandor, who offers her a little bit of tissue, looking out for her.
The Hound is a multi-layered character.
Yes, Very, very interesting character to kind of observe. I would have to say, though, my take on it is more of just Joffrey flexing kind of his authority and power there, like displaying
I agree.
the heads on the pike there and stuff, and just kind of flexing the Sons of like, hey, look what I did to your family. I could do this. I'll do this to the rest of your family, and they come to King's Landing and bend the knee to me.
So I have a quick question on that then for the two of you. Quick question, quick answer. Do you think he put the heads on a pike for the commoners or for Sansa and the people who would Robb Stark sympathizers?
So before we kind of ask that, where is that at? Because is that that placement in the castle? Is that in like the central keep of the castle? So then it would just be inside the. So how would commoners see it then? I guess I'm wondering.
That's a fair assessment. It didn't seem like it took long for him to leave that courtyard in the previous scene to then bring her outside and talk about things outside. So it could be very well be that that's just something in the
Like
excuse
an
me in
armory inside the Red Keep, because it had it might have been a drawbridge.
Yep.
It was
something they were walk on.
It was an unguardrailed walkway to get to a doorway across.
So I'd say it's maybe more for flexing on the people inside the castle of saying like, hey, new person in charge here. Look what I did to the last people who kind of tried to stand up against me.
Right.
I will then call out too. So then, speaking of Sansa, there's that brief moment there where she kind of looks at the edge and looks at.
You saw that, huh?
And I couldn't quite tell if it was her trying to make an attempt to possibly push Joffrey off the edge.
Oh yeah.
For herself to throw herself off the edge so she doesn't have to deal with the torment anymore.
I thought both of those things. The first, I thought she was going to jump because she looked how far down it was. But you can clearly see when you watch it, she moves towards him.
Yep.
If she wanted to jump it in her life, she could have done it. She moved towards him. That was her going to push him off the edge. Yeah. Sander, I think, was the one who grabbed her. I think that she was totally moving in to push him off the edge.
Yeah.
He was unarmed
in
that situation.
Yep. All right. So next we're going to move up to the scene with Robb's camp there, where there's one of Renly Baratheon's men up there kind of coming to talk to Robb about possibly Robb aligning the North with Renly Baratheon. And it just kind of says, again, Mr. Big John Umber there says no Southern king should rule them anymore. And then that's where they kind of all look at Robb and proclaim him as the king in the North, as in the northern part of Westeros is now going to rebel against the rest of Westeros and kind of become their own kingdom ruled by their own king. And they have a scene where they're all standing around yelling, "King in the North, the King in the North." To go over to Gary there, how, like, again, this great music kind of in this scene and stuff like that. What were your takes kind of on just the southern people kind of going, okay, or not the southern people, the northern people, just kind of going, okay.
I thought it was interesting that John Umber started it, because you don't get a lot of introduction to John Umber at this point other than him getting his fingers bitten off, and he's been in some war councils. But I think it was supposed to be a sign of his trust coming full circle, because the first time John Umber speaks, he said, why would I listen to a boy so green he pisses grass? To just him being the first one to be like, I don't want any of this shit. Like, I'll follow this kid over anybody else, because he'd proven himself in battle. He proved that he wasn't green, and he proved that he has the North's best interest in mind. He's an honorable man. And I think it also kind of rang true that there were some kind of sly lines in there about gods.
Yep.
And I think it was very much the, like, for everyone in that room, their religion, their belief in the gods was very, like, the old gods only are really followed in the North. So everything south of there, they just assume they're godless people.
They
So
worship the seven-pointed star.
Mm-hmm.
yes. It's interesting that Theon Greyjoy bent the knee.
Son of a betrayer.
I don't know who the second person was that bent the knee.
I don't think we knew at that time. I didn't recognize it. Just another person. I said something about like that's a piece I can get behind or something.
Yeah.
I disagree with your sentence on faith, Gary. Nobody's ever gone to war over religion.
Just shaking my head.
Any audio listeners, both Tyler and I are shaking our heads.
I do agree with that sentence. I think that was a good rallying cry. It's the Southerners and us versus them mentality, but that really sort of drove it home when they said even their gods are wrong. It does.
And they also talked about dragons in that speech about like, well, we originally bent the knee because the South had dragons. Now the South doesn't have dragons, and they don't. I think it's a well-known, like they're not intimidated by Southern armies.
Right. I mean, clearly, that's the history that they all would share too. Is that the ruling party of the Targaryens had their might from dragons, and they sort of dwindled down to nothing. So without dragons, and that goes all the way back to the first, Starks who bent the knee to Aegon Targaryen during the conquest. Without we bent the knee to the Targaryens, and these aren't Targaryens now.
And I will say too, even they still respect the line of succession of like they say they don't want to follow Renly because he's not really in line to be the king. It is his brother Stannis who should be king then, according to succession.
Correct.
Then we have like just a small scene of Cat going to talk to Jaime there, who Jaime has been captured by the Northern Army there. And I wrote down like she bashes him with a rock there, one good swing at him.
Jaime's got some serious cojones, man. Like, I think he says something like, "Widowhood looks good on you." How do you have a lonely bed? Is that why you've come to see me in the middle of the night, Catelyn Stark? Like, holy cow! I mean, we know nothing about Catelyn other than she is fiercely loyal to family and was willing to start this whole war to defend her family. So the fact that Jaime starts off, insulting the fact that she's just recently lost her husband. Holy cow. It's he's got some cojones.
Yeah, he does.
I think she wanted to smash him a few more times with the rock.
But it is kind of like another peek inside at Jaime's character there of like just a little bit more in depth of just kind of that brashness that is to him of being this, this Lannister, the one of the best swordsmen in the land and everything like that too.
He did say she's stronger than she looks, and I think that was actually a truthful statement. I think that he was kind of surprised that she not only hit him, but hit him as hard as she did.
I had two questions on this scene, one for Jaime, one for Kat. Do you think Kat was ready to kill Jaime? Like, because you could sense that she was real angry and she just wanted to fucking bash his head in.
I'm going to say yes. Well, wait, I take that back. I want to hear your second question, but I say no at that point when she hit him with the rock the first time.
Okay. The second question was Jaime's speech of all the question and answers kind of abruptly sort of ended. And do you think that Jaime wanted to tell Kat the truth?
No.
Like, or do you think he intentionally left it kind of sarcastically open-ended?
I'll answer that, and then here, Tyler, you answer that, and then I'll give my 2 cents.
He wanted.
You're saying the truth about why he pushed her son out the window.
Yes, the truth on why she pushed her, because it was like, and my son Bran, I pushed him out the window. Why?
Because I hoped Deathfall would kill him.
Because if Deathfall would kill him, why? And he said, and then he just paused.
It's late, Lady Cat. Go home.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's Lady Cat. Maybe it's time for you to go to bed or something.
Yep.
So that's my question is like, do you think that in his mind he really, really wanted to tell her, but it's not exposed yet as to that being the reason? I don't know if it ever actually gets exposed.
I don't think he maybe wanted to tell her. He might have just kind of got himself caught up in the moment there of talking with her. I don't think, though, he really wanted to get out because probably him thinking about, what his father always talked to him about family. The family name is what is the strength in the world here. Something like that. I mean, this would be like just deep thought he would have had to have gone into, but like something like that getting out there while it can't be proven at this point in time, could just be out there weakening the Lannister name.
Hey, Nick, you're up.
I think, to answer your first question, no. Catelyn didn't go there to kill him with the rock. She wanted to take out aggressions, and she wanted to probably smack him several more times with it. I think the want to kill him came when he openly confessed that he did push her son out the window. She just has like this shocked look, and she's almost like aghast that, holy crap, I kind of always in the pit of my stomach knew it was you. But then when he admits it, I think this look is shock, but the thought is building, my husband's dead. You just confessed to pushing my son, attempted murder. I'm going to kill you. And so before she does, she wants the answer and wants the truth of why. And that's why she keeps trying to find out the why. Your second question about Jaime, I don't think he wants to. I think he wants to tell her because he's not scared of the response or the repercussions. But he doesn't tell her because of his love for Cersei. Everything we've seen so far, like Tyler's alluding to, is that he's, it's all about family. I'm looking out for family and making sure family's good. Like he even tried to hide. I don't believe him when he says he's not scared of death. Even with Ned in the cellars, Ned says I'm not scared of death, but there are worse things than deaths, like when your family is threatened. And so here, same thing with Cersei with Jaime when he's confronted in his own jail cell. I'm not scared of death. I don't care whatever happens to me. But that's the sentence that makes him pause: is what are you hiding? What did he see you do? And it's the thought of, oh crap, there are loved ones in this world I care about other than me. I may not be scared of death, whether he believes it or not. I don't agree with it. But the fact that there's, what's going to happen to Cersei if it's found out by Lady Cat or she tells other people.
So then, speaking of our Lady Cersei here we get cut to her back in King's Landing, and both her and Lancel Lannister are sharing a bed here, apparently, which is
right
odd.
That's her cousin, again, just for those of you following along at home.
Yes. They get some message there, and it's kind of basically assumed, like I don't think it's actually spoken there, but it's kind of just by the look on her face, it's kind of assumed that she's finally getting message that Jaime had been captured there. And then it just kind of cuts out of that scene.
Yep.
And then we move on to the other Lannisters of the family there. Tywin and Tyrion are basically in their camp, basically discussing kind of, is there a war, is this like in a war council that's going on, or is it just between the two of them?
Nope, it's a war council. There's like 10 different people in the room.
It's a war council that includes the uncle and a bunch of other Lannister higher ups, and they're talking about
Bannerman.
I think it was about whether they should go to war, and the kind of the reoccurring theme in the background is all these guys are talking is that several times Mr. Lannister, the old man, kept saying, they have my son, like, as he feels like no one else is paying attention to, like, oh, war this, war that. And they're like, my fucking son, like, you guys are missing this. So,
that's the sentence that starts this scene, is Tywin is reading a note. I think that's where he realizes they have his son. And that's what they're all gathered there for, is, okay, what's the next move our army's going to do? And all of a sudden he's like, they have my son. And then this side, they're talking about what to do.
Yeah, and then they're trying to possibly, they might think they might be able to make peace with Robb Stark, and then Tyrion utters out the line, like, peace is not an option now, basically, because Ned Stark has been decapitated there.
Peace was never an option.
He knocks a drink glass off the table, and it's like, peace. Like, you'll just as soon have peace as you can drink wine out of this goblet that's smashed on the ground. Like, Joffrey ruined that possibility when he, like, killed Ned Stark. Again,
just screw Joffrey. Tyler's comments about Alistair Thorne is how I feel about Joffrey.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You keep going.
I was just going to say, so then we kind of Tywin dismisses everybody except for Tyrion from the tent there, and then there's like just a great kind of interaction between those two. They're kind of talking about strategy, and Tywin basically says that he's going to have Sir Gregor ride out and set the Riverlands on fire. Sir Gregor, again, is the very large man, also known as the Mountain, brother to Sandor Clegane the Hound. And the rest of them will basically set up camp and rest at Harrenhal. And then Tywin basically informs Tyrion that he is going to be the one to go to King's Landing to serve as Hand of the King in his stead, while Tywin is out fighting the war against the Northerners. And then there's like a line Tywin says is like, "You're my son" here.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of goes back to that issue, though, like we talked about one of the last episodes when Tywin sent Tyrion out to the front line in the vanguard or whatever as kind of a way to try and kill, as we all kind of assume there's like, this is maybe an easier way to try and get you killed out there. But it's still kind of like Tywin basically saying, I'm doing this because you're my son. You're a Lannister. I can at least trust that you're looking out for the family name to try and keep, the king in line or something like that. And then he also tells Tyrion, though, that he will not take his whore to court with him when he leaves.
She has a name.
Sorry. I'm Tywin Lannister.
Getting there.
A long time ago.
Getting there. Just a quick note on that interaction. It's Tywin is just he's Tywin. He's all about family, but when he acts, he does so in such a straight, strict, vengeful way. Like he says, I think he even like not just that you're my son, but he says, "I thought you a stunted fool," and perhaps that's why he tried to put him in the vanguard and have him killed off earlier. But hearing that he had sound advice about we should, hang on to Ned or use him as some sort of tool against the encroaching armies, he sees the wisdom that Tyrion had, and that he should have been more patient and more cautious, and that's caused him now to lose his more boastful son. And it's interesting how important family is between these two families, with Tywin looking out for what he thinks is in the best interest of his family, trying to do what he can now to try and save Jaime, but also to put Tyrion away from the battle, knowing that he's only got one kid left now. If Jaime, something happens to him, my family's dead. I don't have anyone except for Tyrion. So he pulls him back. If you're playing chess, you lose a piece, you got to pull the other one's back so you don't lose your other one, and puts him in a position of power, sends him down to King's Landing to try and rein in any more unruly actions. He says he doesn't even say my daughter or his Cersei. I think he just says his mother in reference to the new king Joffrey and his mother. And so, it's they're not family members in the sense that he cares for them. They're pieces to help him achieve his goal, which is his family being in a position of power and being remembered after he's gone.
Tywin Lannister, the Dominic Toretto of the Game of Thrones universe.
Shotgun and all.
Add that as Nick was going on, is like the one thing that kind of I think before he told him to go to court, he's like, just remember, if anybody gets out of fucking line, like you need to be the one to like set everyone back, whether it's Varys, whether it's Littlefinger, whether it's the king himself, or it's the king, like the queen. Like you need to be basically just reminding Tyrion that like the expectation is that he's going to go there and he's going to be a boss.
He says heads, pikes, walls, and he like nods in agreement.
Just trying to, set the point of like, he's not going to King's Landing to be a yes man.
Exactly. He's going to be the Tyrion from like episode 1 where he's king slapping people left and right.
Episode 2.
Thank you.
Drop the mic. Okay, rolling forward. Where are we at after that scene?
So after this is Dany basically, it cuts to Dany, she's recovering basically after everything that happened to her with that, and we find out that she lost her son there, the stallion that would mount the world. But we find out, I don't know if, like, I've always wondered if this was actually true what happened there, of like the baby is described somewhat by Jorah, but then the witch kind of cuts in and basically says, no, he was a monstrous child, scaled, had wings, blind, but he was also full of worms, meaning he was already dead on the inside there.
Right.
So I'm always kind of wondering, like, is that description actually accurate to what her baby was, or is that just kind of like a scare tactic from the witch there?
I honestly could believe that she, as she is, the what's it, I forget what the term they called, like dragon's blood, like maybe she's the one who can birth the fucking dragon, and like she and then it was just, that was like the child was going to come up in some sort of, I don't know, maybe not completely mutant fucking reptile man sort of thing, but just a very like kind of ugly child that was just gonna fuck shit up. Like maybe, I don't know, immune to fire. So
Something could be. We see the difference with a couple of these little instances, and since we've seen this episode too, at the end, that Daenerys is different from Viserion, where heat and flame don't seem to affect her. So it very well could be that she has some sort of weird, what we would call genetic, thing for her kids.
Yeah, I always kind of just took it as kind of, and maybe too, thinking about it a little bit more, it could have been like something that happened to the child because of the whole voodoo, evil, blood magic stuff that the witch had done, basically to
Right.
quote unquote give Khal Drogo his life back.
Yeah, he's fine. He's up. He's dancing. He feels great.
Yeah. So
also
then,
hashtag Nick skips ahead because he just went to the scene at the end of the episode. Anyway, continue on.
well, I don't know what you're talking about there, Gary. Dany leaves the tent there to find that the Khalasar has basically gone and abandoned her, which is understandable because according to their culture, they only respect the strong one.
A call who cannot ride is no call.
But then she kind of wonders where Khal Drogo has gone to because he's supposed to be alive now. But he's now basically out in a vegetative state, pretty much just staring at the sun because he likes it where it's nice and warm.
Yeah, he is checked out.
And then, Dany this is where Dany kind of learns the truth of this lady who she entrusted there. She says, I saved you. And basically the lady kind of describes how she was already basically raped multiple times before Dany even got there, how she watched her church burn down and all of these people that she knew growing up and stuff like that were slaughtered in front of her. So she wasn't really saved, according to her, when Dany got there.
Lady is just, I wrote down that she's hardened. Like, this is the world she lives in, that like she doesn't live in Westeros, she lives in like wherever the hell we are. Essos. That like she lived in a nice community and it just happened that like her whole fucking village got burned down. So like she just became hardened of like, I just watched a bunch of people die and like she just didn't care anymore. Like it's sort of the realization that like she would just rather be dead at this point. But
I was going to say, I think that she was trying, she kind of alludes to it a little bit, that she's trying to prevent more death from occurring. Like what happened to her was traumatic enough, but she said that the stallion, that baby that would have come out of Khal Drogo, exactly, would have decimated more cities and left more temples and places in ruins. And now she says something like, and now this child will destroy no more cities. And so it's not just that she's remanded herself to dying because of all the torment she's seen. She actively went out of her way to make it seem like she could help Khal Drogo. Something
to sabotage the dynasty.
The dynasty. Something interesting I saw in this rewatch that I missed previously. There's always kind of this this like meme or this thought like Khal Drogo got sick because of an infected boo-boo. Like, no, if you go back and now that we've rewatched this with the foreknowledge that we have, I'm not going to get into, but he looks at it and says it's just a scratch. Like he doesn't care. It's not a bad wound, and he's probably had dozens like that in his lifetime. Daenerys says, can let my mistress lady here let the lady look at it and clean it. And that's when he starts to not feel good. After this lady, this now we find out witch, starts to do something to it. So really on a second watch, it's not necessarily that he gets sick from this and the witch has to intervene. It's that the witch is the one who made his cut probably infected or worse. Like whatever healing magic, or clearly there is magic in this world, whatever she did or tried to imbue in his wound is what made him sick, which then put her in a position where now only she, quote unquote, like Tyler said, can give him his life back. So really, it's not that he's this great warrior who died from a cut is kind of the joke amongst, the pop culture. It's that like this witch has been playing this endgame for a long time, I thought.
All right. So after that scene, we go back to our boy John there at the wall. He's kind of getting ready to leave there because he thinks he's going to go play in war with his brother Rob there because he's found out the news about his father Ned being killed. And Sam says, "No, you can't leave us now here." And John just kind of looks and says, "I have to," and basically rides off, kind of somewhat riding into Sam there and knocking him on his butt. And it just kind of cuts there. And then we go back to Mr. Tyrion in his tent talking to Shay about why she can't go with him to King's Landing. But kind of in the end there, it's kind of determined, I think I'm going to take you with instead here anyways.
Just the weird note about Shay has a line when Tyrion's just sort of like staring off in the distance saying, my dad said I can't bring you, where Shay says something. Did he mention me or did he, it just seemed like she had this momentary thought of like, ooh, Tywin mentioned me? Tywin knows of me? Or it just seemed weird because she was like packing and then just like clear cut in the middle of what she was thinking.
Yeah, and then so we go back to John, who's being chased by his brothers now, basically, to try and bring him back to the thing. And the only reason John ends up stopping is because is it Sam who ends up running into the tree branch, or is it one of the other ones? So Sam ends up running into a tree branch and gets knocked off his horse, and then John comes back around to help him. And then all of the three of them, there's John, it's Pip, and Gren,
I think.
They all kind of surround John there, basically, and start reciting the Night's Watch oaths back to him to try and convince him that, no, you swore a vow, we're your family now, you're here to help us, pretty much. And then we have back to a scene of Dany basically bathing Drogo to see if there's kind of any, and she's kind of basically trying to see if there's any kind of life left in him there, like any positive life or any kind of somewhat of his old self is still hiding there at all. And that's when it's kind of made that she realizes there's nothing left kind of in this guy except for he's basically just a husk of a shell, just still living. He's still technically alive, but he's not really alive in the sense of being himself anymore. And Dany kind of makes the decision to kind of basically just put the pillow over his face to kind of end his life right then and there.
I made a note in mine of like, perhaps this is how I will go out. At some point, my wife will just smother me.
If we're lucky.
You don't ever have those days, Nick, where you're just like, yeah, I might just be smothered in my sleep.
No, I really don't. I
guess my wife's just a special lady to me that keeps me on edge.
I do like that she repeats the line that the witch said from earlier, where he said, "When will he be the way he was before?" And she says, "When the sun sets in the east and rises in the west," which clearly just means never. But she repeats the same thing about, I'll see you again when the sun sets in the west and sets in the east and rises in the west.
And then we have just kind of an interesting scene we cut to of Mr. Grand Maester Pycelle kind of talking about kings after being with a lady there, and he
the same lady that Baelish was with teaching, and the one who came down from north with from Theon.
Yep, he kind of just discusses all of the stuff that he's seen in kings throughout his lifetime of kind of serving as Grand Maester in the area there. And then kind of he talks about how he used to be friends with the Mad King, but he kind of watched him slowly go mad, which was kind of just an interesting perspective to realize, it kind of just reminds you that, the Mad King wasn't always the Mad King.
You have a question there, Gary?
I actually, and maybe this is jumping ahead, that you notice it's not it's not just the end of this scene, but it's this part of the scene where he's just kind of talking to himself, and he's kind of forgets that there's a whore, and she's just in the background, like washing herself up. And but I think my interpretation of the scene is he was just talking to himself, and then as soon as this lady talks to him, he fakes old man, like, and then at the end of the scene, like he stretches, and I was like, oh, I'm still a young man. And then as soon as he like turns and ready to open the door, he like punches and goes back into old man mode. So I think this scene's supposed to sort of inform you that like you've never seen Maester Pycelle in private, and in private he's a very smart, very well-rounded person, but he sort of puts on this mask of being kind of old and slow so that people underestimate him.
I think he's smarter than we think. My interpretation of that was that it was not only that it was my interpretation of that scene was that he was not only doing it for our benefit as the audience to see that he has a mask that he's wearing, but also he's doing it for the prostitute who's there, because he knows, or he probably already requested that person from Littlefinger, because we know that she was at his brothel. So I don't think that it's not just for our benefit. I think he's pretending and feigning this long-winded story that rambles and goes nowhere, because the prostitute ends with, was there a point to this sentence? And he's like, and she just forget it, because he knows that she'll go back and say something to Baelish about he was old, he seemed senile, and he rambled. It's not that in my privateness he seemed coherent, he seemed like he was talking about something, he asked about you directly. It's that he's this old senile man and he's not seen as a threat. And so I think that it was not just for our benefit as the audience member, but I think he's feigning his senility even in that story, not just afterwards with his physicality.
Yeah, good point there. I never thought about it like that before too, but it's also kind of showing us though too, like he's just another person playing basically the Game of Thrones there, trying to appear to be something he's not actually, like appear to be a slow, old, senile kind of old man, frail old man, when really he's actually, I mean, he is old, but he's like more of a spry and limber kind of person there who's got somewhat of a game he's playing himself.
If he says 67, I think, or something like that, is the years that he's been around, being that old and seeing the good and the bad in these different kings, oh, absolutely, he knows how to play the game. And so he's totally, he got his own best interests in mind. What he's doing, he knows Littlefinger's watching, and while he may have requested this prostitute because he was clearly with her, she's washing up. It could be that Littlefinger sent her saying, tell me everything that Master Pycelle does. What's his private chambers like? Give me dirt on him. And so it could be all of that, just as much as it's him pretending that he doesn't know anything, as much as she's actually maybe a spy.
I never even thought about that, Nick. Like, I guess my interpretation on the most times I watch it is like, oh, he's maybe the first watch through is like, oh, okay, well, he's just talking like trying to it's just an exposition dump. And then this last time when I watched it, I saw like basically that she's just wallpaper, like in his life. But you interpreted it as like he was playing a part, assuming she's a spy.
Absolutely. I mean, if Ned Stark, who is seen as this paragon of honor, was just killed, literally there's no honor left in the world. I'm going to not be trustful of anybody that comes anywhere near me, let alone a woman who was quite literally trained by Baelish, who's master of coin, who is, someone I don't necessarily trust right away. I would have my guard up. I would act senile in his sense, or seem like I'm not a person who's dangerous.
Tyler, you're the tie-breaking vote. Do you think it's that
doesn't have to be tiebreaker? It's just that there's different thoughts of.
I just had never thought about it that way. That like he could be, but I don't think that as I read the scene, I don't think it was that deep that he was faking. I just thought he was just like rambling on and thinking because he doesn't have anyone to talk to.
It could be
talking to a whore because
No, so
Like,
you missed it there, Gary. That when you disconnected there all of a sudden. Like I do kind of agree with Nick. Like I think that it's him kind of playing the game with the Game of Thrones, basically there of like presenting that he's this old frail man there basically who's a little bit loopy upstairs when really he's
Mm-hmm.
not. I mean he's old, but he's not really frail, he's not really senile or anything like that. He's still got his wits about him. And then yeah, too, the horror basically being from Peter Baelish's brothel there kind of adds another layer that okay, he's trying to make sure that Baelish doesn't really see him as a threat or kind of doesn't have information on him that would prove kind of detrimental to whatever he might be trying to do in his time there.
In the sense of keeping this theme going too with Baelish, let's move forward. I think there's a Baelish scene coming up, isn't
So
there? Is that
it's
next?
Next there. It's basically another absolutely wonderful scene of basically Baelish and Varys talking in the throne room. And they asked, I think it's Varys asked the question of like, because he walks behind Baelish and sees Baelish basically just staring at the throne, and Varys asks, how do you see yourself on the throne?
He says, when you see yourself on the throne, because he knows he sees himself on the throne, or he sees Baelish and sees himself on the throne, he says, do you see everyone else around you simping and groveling at what you're doing? Simpering, he says. And Baelish says it's hard to do so when their heads are on pikes, without their heads or something to that extent. And so that line alone, yeah, Baelish absolutely does not have everybody else's best interests in mind. That sentence implies that he would rather see these people he despises around him dead. So, yeah, in the sense of that last scene, I don't think that Baelish would just casually send someone that he knows could quite literally worm her way into someone's bed. Because that scene from the previous episode where he's teaching the prostitutes how to make love, but he's like telling them about what to do psychologically. It's all about like manipulation and getting into their inner thoughts and giving them not only what they have, but like implying that what they're giving them is everything they've ever wanted and messing with them, with their thoughts. So absolutely, yeah. No, he's not just sending a prostitute. Oh, sure, Pycelle. Yeah, I'll send one of my girls over. Here she is. Dur, dur, dur. It's that I'm sending over one of my trained, I'm just a spies, So it's there's more there.
And then they kind of both ask each other, like, I forget who asked the question first. I think it's probably Varys. They ask one another. They basically kind of look at one another and just think you kind of see that there is at least a mutual admiration between the two of these people.
I made a note that they both admit that they admire one another.
Yes.
And so it's just a mutual admiration that they both actually say, like, well, I actually admire you. Like, I think that you're good for the realm.
I don't think they say they're good for the realm there. I think it's just more of like they admire
Mutual respect for the game they play.
Yes, there we go. That's more of it. They respect one another for how they're playing the game.
Their ability to play the game. They're both skilled opponents.
So next up is that Arya scene, which we already covered earlier this episode here. Next, we go back up to the wall, though, and it's a scene between the Lord Commander Jorah Mormont and Jon Snow there, and he talks about how Jon Snow was brought back there and how the Lord Commander wouldn't do anything because, if they executed everybody who ran away for the night or something like that, only ghosts would be guarding the wall. And it's honor that brought you back here. And Jon says something to the effect of like it wasn't my honor's choice or something like that. And Jorah, somebody correct me, but then Jorah says basically, I didn't mean your honor or something like that.
Yep, you're good.
Then he kind of talks about how they're receiving kind of notes and words from some of the rangers out there that the wildling tribes are out there banding together underneath something. And that there's more reports of these blue-eyed corpses out there that they've already experienced there. And that the Night's Watch is now going to ride out beyond the wall, ride out in force against whatever is out there. And he turns to Jon basically and kind of just asks him, are you a brother of the Night's Watch or are you a bastard that wants to play at war? And I just want to comment again, Jorah Mormont's speeches are just great. That man could inspire anybody to just stand up and go try and kick some ass.
Could inspire anyone.
Inspire anyone, yep.
Exactly. And it's underscored again by this magnificent composer that we've talked about.
Yes. All right, and then we cut to the final scene of the final basically part of the episode here. It's cut to Dany. She's building a funeral pyre for Drogo's body, and Jorah is trying to convince her otherwise because he kind of senses something is up with what Dany is trying to do.
Jorah already consents that, that she's gonna set herself on fire.
Yes, and basically then Dany turns to the rest of the Dothraki people that are there and everybody else, and basically says, you are free from my rule or whatever, but if you choose to stay and know that you are part of now my family, my brotherhood, my clan, my new Khalasar there. And you see some people run away there though.
Mm-hmm.
But then they light the fire there. They also, I should mention too, they tie the witch to the fire before it's lit there.
I think her name is Mira. Is that it? Something like that?
That sounds right.
Bitches don't need names, and bitches don't need names.
Whoa.
Mic drop.
The TVGC does not condone anything that Gary says.
Correct. But it's something like the witch says there to Dany, like, if you want to hear me scream, you won't get that. And Dany says, it's not your scream.
It's your life.
It's your life, yep. But so then the fire is lit. The witch starts screaming because obviously the fire hurts.
She
starts chanting.
I was going to say, I was watching this with captions on, and yeah, it says that she's singing at first, is what the caption said. So she's like trying to do some witch evocation, something.
So it's similar to sort of the chanting scene of when she's sacrificing the horse for Khal Drogo's life. It's sort of that like chanting. And then, like, it just sort of gets interrupted by her, like, oh, fuck, I'm on fire.
And then we see Dany slowly walk into the ring of fire and all, like, right in. So the pyre is basically built with, like, a spot underneath it. So it's like a bunch of wood stacked up on each side. And then in the middle, there's a big opening, and Drogo's body sits on top of that. And Dany basically walks into that. And then it kind of cuts to the next day where there's still smoke in the air and everything. And then you see that the smoke is cleared out. And there sits Dany, unburnt. She still has her hair, though, which is a change from the books. And also, though, with Dany is 3 baby dragons now born into the world for the first time in many, many years. The world now has dragons in it.
Oh, snap.
And I want to call out again the music here. Dany's theme basically is just such a good theme kind of throughout the show there. And then the episode basically ends with the dragons the baby dragons kind of crying out.
It's building with the music. It's got the crescendo, and then the dragon screech is also crescendoing, where they're just kind of like the small little thing that's kind of. It doesn't even start with that, like the cinematography of that scene too is that we see just Dany sitting there huddled over holding something, and you don't even really know what's like. Holy crap, she's alive! And then you realize, yeah, the dragon eggs hatched that she had brought with her into the fire, and you see it creep over. I think it's the blackish one that like creeps over her shoulder and kind of like walks around, and then you see it's got wings and everything. Like it's a full on dragon, and yeah, just the crescendo of the music and the fact that it's not just this timid little thing. It's like screeching at Jorah, like, aggressively for being something so small. That this is big.
I had in my notes a Khalasar count. I paused during the widest scene.
Nice.
And I'm going to say approximately 50. I literally paused and started counting. And in the foreground, there's about 30, and there's maybe about 5 or 10 in the background. Okay. So about 50-ish is what her group or Khalasar is right now.
A definite reduction from the Khalasar that she rode with Khal Drogo to begin with.
To face Dothrak. It's interesting too the difference between just the beginnings of this episode or the end of this episode to the beginning of this season. In episode 1, we first meet her and she is shy, she is quiet, she's terrified of these barbarians altogether. And here, she's got her own Khalasar, and she's got a couple titles already to her name. I am the daughter of the dragons, and she says the unburnt by the end of this episode. And that she's got these dragons, like she's clearly be coming into her own as a position of power and authority, like we were just talking about earlier with when the Starks were referencing the power of the Targaryens. Those who have the dragons have the power.
Is this the first time we've heard her title as Stormborn?
Right. Yes.
And that is in reference to that when she was born during like a storm on Dragonstone.
Yes, I believe so. Daenerys Stormborn.
Go ahead and ask your question there, Gary. It looks like you got one.
Okay, so earlier in the episode, or in the last episode, the witch made a point to say that only death can pay for life. On a rewatch, I caught the eyes and the dragons are born. Do you think that is a reference of the magic, that somehow the witch's death pays for the dragon's life?
Maybe. I think more so that the fire helped bring the dragons to life in the extreme heat. I think that the most of the magic probably died with the witch, since she was the one who was creating it. But it could, I don't know, it could be. I don't think that's completely outside the realm of this magical world. What do you think, Tyler? You look like you got a thought.
I mean, it's possible. Although, like, in this world, magic really isn't a thing at this point in time, though. So, I don't really think it was the witch's magic necessarily that brought it back. It may have been. I mean, you could do like some big introspective look of like it was Dany's love for Drogo and this Drogo sacrificing his body and all of that sparked the dragon eggs to be created, or it could just be as simple as the fire brought these what were thought to be stone eggs back to life and pretty much hatched dragons out of them.
It's just like a random sort of thought on a rewatch that, sort of came up to me. I was like, okay, well, Drogo is technically magic, although I think he's dead by this point. But the witch is definitely like saying some fucking spells while she's burning, and the dragon eggs are already in the pyre by that point. So,
but she doesn't want more death and destruction. That was the whole point of cursing Drogo.
Dragons.
But I don't know. I just see her chanting and giving her last breath to make sure that the dragons come to fruition. Seems out of character for her. I was going to point.
Sorry to cut in there. I was going to say, I don't think she's chanting like magic. I think she's really just kind of talking out, like the witch is kind of talking out loud to kind of keep her mind off of the fire. I don't think she's really like casting any magical spells or incantations there.
I saw it more as like a blessing of like, I commit myself to the flames. Please don't let this be too painful for me type thing.
Something like that, yeah.
That was what I saw. I was going to point out on the title, on the thought of Dany with titles, she mentions she's of the blood of old Valyria. Valyria, in some sense, is mentioned in that little speech of hers. And I was going to point out that Valyria was known for, before it was destroyed, having all these magics and flames and things that they were trying to use too. So it could be that the eggs were waiting for a true Valyrian heir, and maybe that's what caused them to actually spike. Because I mean, they had, I don't know, I don't think we ever heard when we first got them from Illyrio at the wedding where he said how long they'd been out or that they were just where they were from. But it could be that the eggs only hatch in true fire when there's a Valyrian heir around. And clearly that wasn't going to be Viserion. And so, Viserys. And so maybe that's where that comes from. I don't know.
Anyway, I just like, on a rewatch, just like, just sort of thinking about, and going back to only death can pay for life. But anyway, just a random, was it fan fiction theory?
One non-dragon comment, too, about that last scene. You mentioned how Jorah is not keen on wanting Dany to walk into the fire. He sees it as a suicide to die with Khal Drogo. She kisses him on the cheek. Have we seen any affection of that sort from her to Jorah Mormont before? Because he makes reference to, I have sworn to you to defend you and do whatever you ask and obey you. But that was a moment between the two of them where I kind of felt like she showed a loving respect to him,
a motherly respect that like he sort of like, oh, I can't remember what her response is, but like, oh, you don't understand, like, because Daenerys knows or believes that the fire can't hurt her. Whoever we're talking about, Jorah doesn't believe that or know that. So, like, for her, it's like, oh, well, you think I'm gonna burn to death? Don't worry, that's not gonna happen.
It was interesting to me that kiss on the cheek, not even like a quick peck or something, like it's a slow lean in on his cheek kiss. His face just seemed different when that happened, and I wanted to make a note of that too. That's all.
So to kind of then wrap this up, we'll kind of just take a little bit of an introspective here, look at season 1 in general here. I want to kind of start off with this because I touched on the end of the last episode with the word naive. Of a lot of characters are basically naive when we first kind of meet them in the show here. So you've got, like, I wrote down just a few examples here of like Sansa just kind of being, and I don't know if it's her really being naive about the way Joffrey is, or if it's just her being like a teenage girl, but she's kind of got that naiveness of like, oh, Joffrey's this nice, sweet prince or whatever. He wouldn't do anything to hurt anyone, which we later come to find out, no, he's a terrible, terrible child here, who's now just been given a lot of power to kind of do whatever he feels like it. And then you've got Ned kind of being naive when he's brought down to King's Landing there, of him not really understanding that there is a game to be played in King's Landing. It's not just the honorable thing is always done every time there, and it ultimately leads to him basically losing his life there because he thought the honorable thing to do, even though it was naive, was to tell Cersei, hey, I know. And then Cersei basically had him captured here pretty much. And then you got Jon kind of being a little bit naive about the Night's Watch. Like when he first joins, like he had it built up in his mind of it being like this great band of brothers thing. Like these are honorable people up here doing the honorable thing of serving their time here at the Wall to protect the realm. And he kind of comes to realize, no, this is just a place full of a bunch of convicts and criminals and people who were sent here to serve here instead of lose their lives. And then also kind of just Dany being a little bit naive. And again, I don't know, this could be kind of chalked up to more of like her character of being so young and everything like that, but just kind of being naive to this Dothraki culture, and then also just being naive to trusting people, like when she trusted the witch there to kind of help with Khal Drogo's injury, and it ended up being a very bad incident that happened for him. Kind of thoughts on any of that there, guys? Like anything else, maybe some of the other characters?
I was sort of thinking when you mentioned Jon, I was going to say, kind of thinking from the first episode to this episode, when you mentioned Jon, something definitely came up, and that was that you were saying like, okay, he used to think it was this honorable brotherhood, and I think actually in this episode, it actually came full circle that at the end of the episode, Jeor Mormont kind of calls him to action to say like, okay, like we need you to do the honorable thing and really truly fulfill your vows. And we need to go out there and figure out what's going on, and we need to defend the realms of men. And so I think it actually kind of sort of comes full circle for him. And I know that was sort of when you mentioned Jon, that. And then I guess, Nick, did you have anything on that? Otherwise, I had some other like first to last episode comparisons.
No, I agree with that. Just like to Tyler's comment that kind of goes hand in hand with that is I thought that this whole first season was very instructional. A lot of the characters are very naive and they don't really understand a lot. And in a way, you know, us as the audience too, there are those exposition dumps, like you mentioned earlier, Gary. And so the characters learn what life at the Wall is like. They learn what it's like in the South if you're in the political courts. You know, it's Ned learns, unfortunately. Some of those experiences and instructional moments are very painful moments for the characters that survive them. You know, he learns what happens if you just blindly walk in thinking everyone else is honorable and will honor what your dead friend left as his last will and testament. You know, some of that stuff, I thought that this first season was very instructional. You know, Dany learns what it's like to be a Khaleesi and learns that if she wants to stay alive, she has to stand up for herself. You know, Viserys was ready to kill her a couple times, you know, and sacrifice her for what he thought was what was best for the realm, for him. And just a lot of those characters, it was an interesting season because we learned a lot, as did many of the characters.
sort of my reflection is sort of the first scene versus the last scene of people or things. The first scene of the whole show is north of the wall with the Night's Watch, and them being like, "Oh, we found the whites." And the last scene you follow the Night's Watch is them going out into the north to figure out what's going on. The first scene that you introduce Arya is them. She literally shoots a bow behind her brothers and like kind of sort of plays that like I think she's so maybe in the first scene you see her she's sewing.
Yep.
And in the last scene you see her she's disguised as a boy. The first scene you see Ned in, he beheads a guy. The last scene you see Ned in, he's beheaded.
That's a good point.
The first, like, and then this sort of Ned's arc of the season is that his son ends up going to war at the end of the season. At the beginning of the season, like, Ned, like, you get introduced to the king coming up to, like, be fully like encapsulate the Starks into the fold. And at the end of the season, they're at war. Sansa, very innocent at the beginning of the season, very defeated at the end of the season. Catelyn sort of grows throughout the season of like it's sort of you talked about naive. I'd sort of say it's more like. The characters are in flux that like when you started the show, especially when it first came out, like you could never foresee who these people would become. Nick says that Joffrey's always a bastard, like, but Joffrey, the first scene you see Joffrey is he's quiet. I think he doesn't have a speaking line in the first episode at all. Maybe he introduced himself, but he's very much a chivalrous dude in the first episode. And very nice to Sansa. And in the last episode, he's just an asshole. So just that comparison of how there's kind of a arc between front and back. Anyway, Nick, any other thoughts?
With both of what you and Tyler are saying, I think it will be interesting to see how these characters in flux who were naive, who, as I mentioned, are learning how the world around them operates. It will be interesting to see where their aspirations and their plans to, whatever they hope to do, transpire in the next season.
All right. So I think that probably takes us to a good stopping point here for the episode here. For next on our plate here, we are jumping into season 2, and we are going to watch the first 4 episodes of season 2 here. And I, of course, don't have them pulled up here to bring up the names here real quickly. Give me just one moment here.
Nick, tell us an interesting story while we wait for Tyler to open something.
No, that's going to take too long. I finally found it.
I do know a few.
So we've got season 2. Episode 1 is The North Remembers. Episode 2 is The Nightlands. Episode 3 is What Is Dead May Never Die. And episode 4 is Garden of Bones.
Holy cow. Something interesting too, just like a final thought, is the names of these titles. They're not just names. Like Fire and Blood is the name of House Targaryen. So the fact that that last episode is Fire and Blood, something crazy is going to happen with the Targaryens. So just hearing the names of those episodes, I don't remember what happens in those episodes directly, but going forward, the Garden of Bones, there's going to be some crap that happens.
Garden of Bones?
Yeah.
I'm guessing that maybe is an introduction of some new
spoilers.
Shh. I said new people, Nick.
The night is dark and full of spoilers.
All right.
I think it's when they finally go to Hogwarts and like they find the Death Star. I don't know.
Shaking my head.
All right, well, that'll do it for us here at the GoT Rewatch podcast. We'd like to thank everybody for listening in, and we will catch you next time when we again jump into season 2, episodes 1, 2, 3, 4. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Have a good day, everybody.